Fantastic stuff. Please welcome one of the stars of Frankenweenie, Mr. Martin Short. And the executive producer, Mr. Don Hahn.
Hello.
Sir.
How are you?
Good. Yourself? Hold on.
Thank you.
See
Pleasure.
you.
Hello.
Thanks for coming.
Hello.
How's
Thank
your
you.
London adventure been so far? Have you been out to see the sights?
Unbelievable.
Yeah?
I went to Covent Gardens for dinner last night.
Really? Anywhere nice?
Fantastic.
Excellent, glad you're settling in.
Yeah.
So we've seen the trailer, but can you set up Frankenweenie for everybody here? Just exactly what is Frankenweenie?
Wow. Started as a short film that Tim Burton made when he was at Disney back in the early 80s. So many of you are familiar with. You've seen it. And then about 5 years ago here in London, I went and visited Tim and said, you have this great piece. Why don't we expand it? Why don't we, it's Frankenstein mythology. Why don't we stretch it and pull it and add more monsters? And he jumped in, and we brought in John August, who's a great writer. He's collaborated with on Big Fish and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and kind of expanded it out and turned it into probably the film he always wanted to make, except when he was a 25-year-old kid at Disney, that Disney wouldn't give him the money to. So
Yes.
it's an interesting full circle that he's come.
It certainly is. And you worked with Tim.
I did.
Back on-
Yes, I did. Back on Fox and the Hound, where
Yeah.
Tim was woefully miscast.
How was that experience, briefly?
Well, great. I mean, he's a really, oddly, I don't think he's changed all that much to me. He's a really introverted guy. We all knew he was kind of different from the rest of us. But he's remarkably big-hearted and has this, this is a boy and his dog kind of love story, for lack of a better word. Even though he has this kind of quirky side to him, he has this big heart, and I think that always is in his best movies, where you see these kind of outcast characters trapped in a misshapen body, and they, redeem themselves, or they are the heroes of their own story, and I think that's what makes Tim really special.
Yes, sir. And Martin, you've worked with Tim before as well on Mars
Mars
Attacks.
Attacks,
Yeah. So it's been a while since then. When did you come back into his orbit, so to speak?
Do you know, I'd seen Tim, we run into each other,
Yeah.
and I've done shows, and he comes to them, but in New York. But, I remember when I first met him for Mars Attacks, I was surprised because I was expecting more of the dark genius. In fact, I played Tim on a special I'd done. I'm going to show you this. The premise was he was doing a remake of Love Affair. He was directing Lyle Lovett, Joe Flaherty, and Brett Butler.
Of course.
Anyway,
yeah.
but when I met him, I found him to be focused, funny, very funny, and loved to laugh. When I worked with him in Mars Attacks, I was expecting, there was Jack Nicholson and Rod Steiger and all these people, and I was expecting him to be this is what we must do, and he was very loose, he's very creative, and it dawned on me that he hires the people he wants,
Yeah.
and then now he's done the first big chapter of his job, and now he wants to hear from them, and then you end up doing exactly what he wanted.
True.
That's manipulation. That's what directors do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Had he changed
ones.
at all in the 15 years?
I
or
didn't
so?
find him any different.
Yeah.
To be quite honest, in the 15-year span, I found him to be the same kind of. I play three characters in this. The parents, Catherine and O'Hara and I did it together.
Yeah.
Which is atypical that we would record together. And that he had very specific ideas. He really wanted it very, very, very from the heart, very calm. The way people can be, they talk like this, actually. They don't talk like that, even though you think you're being normal. The other characters that I play, he now wanted to play with them and experiment. And, tape is cheap, so you try a million different angles. You can be British, you can be low, you can be high, you can be all the different voices. I remember at one point on the second session I came in and I had this idea that Mr. Burgermeister might be someone who had a 4-pack a day cigarette habit, but had quit about 2 months. There's a little emphysema there. Go. Well, Tim, that's and that's what he loves. That fuels him.
So we're going to meet Mr. Burgermeister in a second in a clip, but can you take us through the other characters you play?
I play Mr. Burgermeister, the dad, and Nasser, who is one of the students, kind of a Boris Karloff character, more with a lift, though. In fact, before every take, I would, there was a TV series that Boris Karloff did in the States called Thriller. And it would always open. Remember Thriller? And now this will be a thriller. And so before each take, I would YouTube Boris Karloff and listen to it and go, okay, let's go. And until you kind of, but it became more of a speech impediment at the end.
And of course, you play one of the nicest Frankensteins ever committed to film.
Yeah, that's a sweet father.
Yeah, sweet dad as well.
Yeah.
And we're about to meet Mr. Burgermeister in a clip. It's our introduction to him and his niece, Elsa. Don't know if you want to talk about.
Yeah, Elsa, played by the lovely Winona Ryder. And again, Tim has this kind of the Burton players that he goes back to again and again. It's so cute. That he goes back to it again and again. And Winona was a old friend and was able to come into this show and play this role for her. So next door neighbor, Mr. Burgermeister, the mayor of New Holland, and his niece.
So take a look at the clip. Thank you. I can sense it in the voice.
Dutch Day.
It's Dutch Day. It was really difficult explaining to our British crew, who are terrific. We made the film here in London, what Dutch Day was, but through the eyes of Southern California post-war kids. So, and we had to go around Burbank and Southern California taking pictures of ranch houses and things just to explain the kind of stucco, and so we could build New Holland to look that way, because it's Tim's story, and so we had to build his neighborhood.
Was because obviously the short was live action back in the 80s.
Right.
This clearly is not live action. Can you talk about Tim's decision to do that? Or did that come from you? Did that come from Disney? Or?
Well, it didn't come from me. I think if I did anything, I just held up a mirror and said, look, this is really a great story that you should revisit.
Yeah.
And Disney was always on board. I think it's interesting that there's a lot of creative risk in pretty much any movie you make, but in this one, it's in black and white, it's in 3D, it's a monster movie. But I think what everybody responded to is how personal it was to Tim, that it was really his story, and this introverted kid up in the attic making films and all that stuff was kind of about him. So he was very true to the original movie, and yet not afraid to expand it and grow it, and really wanted to be an homage to the monster movies of the 50s and 60s. That's part of the reason that black and white works, because it's almost a character in the film. And then to bring in the references to Frankenstein and the Mummy and Creature from the Black Lagoon and all those things, so that one segment of the audience is going to know that and love that and enjoy it on that level. And then if you're a kid and don't know who Lon Chaney is, that's okay. You'll just you'll get it on that level. Okay.
And it's also a film that, as you say, it's a 3D. It's a monster movie. It tackles the concept of death head on, which for a quote-unquote kids film is very unusual. Was it difficult at all to push this through, to get this thing made?
I think there were a lot of raised eyebrows at times and occasional sucking of lips, but I think in the end...
Sucking of lips, what exactly is that?
We'll talk later.
Yeah.
Essentially, you're trusting the movie to Tim Burton. So in lesser hands, I think it may have been more of an issue, but I think Tim and Disney have had a long relation together. Tim's first gig was as an animator at Disney, and so it wasn't a huge stretch to say, we can trust one of our most iconic directors, artists, storytellers of our time with this story, because he's pretty capable.
Martin, apart from the draw of Tim Burton, what else drew you to this project? Was it the fact that it's atypical? It's not like a normal animated film. It does tackle death head on. It is quite creepy.
Well, my honest answer is Tim Burton.
Yeah.
In the sense that when you get a phone call from Tim to be in a movie, you don't kind of say, "Is there craft service? Who's catering?" You kind of have an instinct to say, yes. In fact, Tim had said, "I want you to play 3 characters," and both Catherine and I would say, "What sense does that make, that we're playing 3 characters?" But she said neither one of us wanted to raise it to Tim so that he wouldn't say, "Yeah, no, you're right. You should only play 1 character."
Right.
But what I do love about this is what's interesting about when we talk about death and loss, particularly for a child. Hopefully, it's not a parent or a grandparent. What it mostly is a pet.
Yeah.
And for that reason, and also the idea that death is people are so afraid to even bring up the subject to a child, as if it would decimate them. And and yet they do experience with the pet. So I think that just on that level, the story is so original and ultimately important. And then you bring in the idea of science versus creationism, and that Martin Landau's character brings up. And although I told the press today that I had done that too.
Oh, really?
Well, I just felt I wanted to play 4 characters.
Yeah,
They
no, I
said, "Why is
understand.
Martin Landau here?" And everyone said, "No one knows."
We just keep showing up.
You're just
Yeah.
showing up, and no one has
Yeah.
the heart to say,
No, that's actually true. Yeah.
But I think that it becomes it's so it has a great deal of heart, the film, but it's also about something very important.
And it's a very funny film as well, despite the subject matter. And how much room for improvisation do you have with a script by John August, with a director like Tim, who has a very singular vision?
I can't honestly remember. I know that the script was very, very strong. So there's not this sense of, "Ooh, I got to fix this," However, you're there, and as I said earlier, tape is cheap.
Yeah.
And so there's this tendency to, now that you're getting in the character, you just, especially if you're tend to improvise, you come up with lines. What was used and what wasn't used, probably Tim would know much better than I can't remember. I'm sure it's just all the script.
Okay. And we've got another clip coming up now, which is where we meet Sparky, but a special adapted Sparky, if you will. Don, this is a scene in the attic with Mrs. Frankenstein. Don't know if you want to set it up?
Yeah, well, we wanted to set Sparky up. Tim wanted him to be a real dog. So we brought real dogs into the studio. We studied them. We wanted to get the behaviors down just right. And even after he's brought back in kind of his Frankenstein form, we had to feel like this was a real pet. So having a leading character in a movie that doesn't speak, I mean, that's really, maybe on Dumbo we did it years ago, but that's really unusual. Yeah. So in this particular scene, it's the first time anybody other than Victor has seen the dog in any state at all, and his mom comes up the stairs and discovers this new friend they have in their attic.
Indeed. Let's take a look at the clip. Thank you.
It's a normal reaction.
Yeah, I would say.
It's a fine line to tread. You have a dog, a zombie dog, essentially. How do you make it cute without making it scary or off-putting?
And it's remarkable because the puppets we made this with, it's all done in stop motion like Nightmare Before Christmas. Yep. And Sparky's puppet's about the size of your fist. So you're trying to create not just movement, but these performances really out of these small puppets. The adult characters are about this high. And it's really the art of the animator that brings them to life. And more than just moving them, you're really trying to create those convincing moments between the characters that you can believe that they're actually flesh and blood. It's one of the reasons Tim wanted to pick stop motion as the technique for this, because it's bringing inanimate things to life. It's the Frankenstein story technique. So it was the perfect technique to use for this. And I think there's great appeal in it. There's an appeal to something hand done, just like a handwritten letter you might get or a thank you note. Right. It means something. And as much as I love computer graphics and the amazing movies we see from Pixar or DreamWorks, there's something wonderful about that hand-done craft of stop-motion animation and being able to see that it's a handmade movie.
Oh yeah, we can almost see the
I just say what I loved about that scene I just saw was the innocence of Sparky, because he's just like a dog. That's how you greet. If you've been away for a week and you come home, and your dog sees you, he's all excited. Yeah. He doesn't know he's a zombie.
Yeah, he doesn't know he's been killed at any point. And did you have anything to play with on a tactile level when you were recording your voice? Because Mr. Frankenstein looks a lot like you. Yeah, just Catherine, but he looks a lot like you. So did you have examples of the characters you might be playing to look at, to draw inspiration from?
Yeah, when you first show up, there are drawings of the character you're going to do, and then they film you, and because you never know, you might say a line. Yeah. You might make a hand gesture that the animator will say, "Gee, see, I guess that's." When you go no or something, they might say, "Oh, that's an interesting." So somehow that sneaks in too. But no, when you start with the voice, you just when you look at Mr. Burgermeister, you kind of say, "Now, what's that voice?" And it's a broad field, and it's just. Like anything, you start to whittle it down. You try everything, and usually the first session is the experimental session, and that's really when it's most fun. I mean, he could sound like that, couldn't he? He could sound in a million different voices, and then everyone kind of sleeps on it, And then they come back saying, you know what, Tim will say, I like when you were doing, because I started off with Burgermeister kind of like Lionel Barrymore, then with President Reagan.
Which is a logical mashup, yeah.
Everyone would
Who
say
doesn't,
it.
yeah.
Who doesn't? I mean, that's so far, so typical. And then you add, the Chainsmoker.
Are those first session outtakes available on DVD? Will we ever hear those? Or
No, but they're fantastic, actually. Yeah, it's one of the treats. And we do videotape the actors because we get a lot out of them. The animators study them and try to find those little blinks and mannerisms, and it really is big inspiration for these characters.
Fantastic. We've got a few minutes for questions for Don and Martin. So if you want to ask a question, put your hand up. Don't be shy. There'll be roving microphones coming around. There's a gentleman here in the front row.
My question for Martin is, you're one of the few actors to have been directed by the three great action, comedy, fantasy directors of the 80s, 90s, Tim Burton, Joe Dante, and John Landis. I wonder if you could just compare and contrast their styles and, as an improv comedian, how much they let you...
Well, there certainly are three great action directors. Each one's different. John is very, big personality. Hello, how are you? Sit down. I want to tell you about Chaplin. And he's very funny, John, and filled with life and stories. And Dante is kind of more of an animation. He's just not animation, but he's like, I don't know. What do you think would be funny? I don't know. He's kind of like. And Tim is more. Why am I impersonating all these directors?
Because it's really good, and we're all really enjoying it. That's what you're doing, yeah.
And Tim is, I don't know. It's just trying to it's kind of like this weird, thing.
Yeah.
So, does that answer your question in any way? No, it really doesn't. Well, there are three great directors, and I think those are three great films that I made with them. Four actually, including two with Tim, and I think that. All very respectful to actors. That's a huge part of it. You can, when you're an improviser, I always think that the actor's job is to provide paint, a lot of colors of paint, so that when the director and editor makes their movie, you're long gone. And they can say, oh, if we only had that take faster. Oh, we do have that take faster. Gee, if we had it, now that I see it, I wish it'd been bigger. No, remember he weaseled that last take and he said he wanted to do it bigger? He called it the freedom take. I think that's what the actor's job should be. Because you don't have, you could do the greatest take that you feel is the greatest take of your career. Cut to the scene's not in, and they don't even cut to you during that moment. So what you as the actor can walk away and say, I gave the director and editor every choice they could have, even choices that they didn't claim they wanted in the moment. But I gave them those choices. I'm going to have a glass of champagne and celebrate myself. I did my job. And that's, kind of what they do. And all those directors, though, were very, with me, very kind of, any other ideas? What else do you want to do? Do you want to try something else? Because I do 100 takes. I always think it's luck if you get it. So they finally said, okay, enough. But very respectful to actors and the process, because they've, as I said earlier, they've hired them. So they're in a way respecting their own instincts when they respect the actor.
Some actors only want to do one take and that's it. And then they
stop.
Sinatra.
Yeah. I'm giving one take and that's it. I'm going to a saloon.
Yeah.
Have you ever worked with people like that? And does that frustrate you then when you've got 99 more in you? And
I would find that tiresome. I mean, I love Frank Sinatra. Hey, and I liked his dad.
Yeah.
But I would say the idea of all this time has been spent, sets and scripts, and now you're there. This is not the time to say I got an early lunch.
Fair enough. Okay, any more questions for Marty? Yes, please.
Martin, you've also done a voice in the new Madagascar 3 film. How did that compare to doing Frankenweenie? Because obviously two different types of movie.
Well, it's two different, two different characters. One's a sea lion from Italy, and similar to the Mr. Frankenstein, but different.
Yeah.
But again, another great company and a truly great executive, Jeffrey Katzenberg. So, again, you're working when you are working with a company or a director or producers whose intention is to create art. You're in very good hands. Lucky hands.
That's for sure.
Any more questions for Martin or Don? Yeah, let's send the front row again, please.
This question for Don. Which is your favourite animated film you've worked on? And you should say The Lion King.
The Lion King. I don't know. They're all children. You love them all. They're all very different experiences. This one is obviously dear to my heart because it's such a different kind of creative thing, and working with Tim has been terrific. I have a soft spot in my heart for Beauty and the Beast, just because it was a special time when I don't think people really came to animation in the way they do now. Animation's a huge boom business now, and then it was kind of finding its sea legs again. And so those early films have a actually, Roger Rabbit has a great place in my heart too, for that same reason, because nobody was going to see animated films. Disney was making a film every 4 years. There was no competition, and I think it brought back our love of those animated characters, and it reminded the audience how much we love animation. So those early movies, I think I was lucky to be there.
It is a golden age at the moment for animation. We got stop motion, CG, single cell animation.
It is. There's a category at the Academy for it. There's 15 to 20 animated films a year. Live action films are becoming more animated. The lines between animation and live action are blurring. And there are some great studios out there like Blue Sky and DreamWorks and Pixar and Disney that are making really interesting films. And so, yeah, it's a good time.
Okay, I think we've got time for maybe one last question. If you have anything, yes, let's stick in this row. Let's see. Why not? Indeed, sir.
This one's to Don. Where do you see animation in the next 10 years and the growth of it?
Animation in the next 10 years. Exciting time. Art schools are pumping out more interesting artists than ever, and the access that we have to tools is spectacular. Our movie was made on Canon 5D cameras and Apple laptops. So you can go out in the store and buy everything we had on Frankenweenie to make the movie, and that's fantastic. I think filmmakers have a real leg up being able to access those tools. So I'd like to see more independent animated films so that you don't need $200 million to make a film. I think we'll always have those, and I always want to see those. I think the audience will always enjoy that, but wouldn't it be great to see more like this film? It's a very personal, independent kind of approach to animation, and I think we'll see a lot more of that. I think we'll see a lot more live action directors kind of migrating into animation, as you saw with maybe Peter Jackson and Tintin and Spielberg last year or whatever. So it's an exciting time. Certainly technology and the technology that artists have to bear on the art form is fantastic, but it all goes back to story. Nobody buys a ticket to go see a technique. We all go to buy a ticket to go be moved and have an experience in the theater. And so if animation is going to be successful, I think that's where it's going to have to go in the next 10 years.
I have a question.
Yes, young man in the front.
For Don.
Yes.
3D. Because it actually is a great question, but where will we be in 10 years? In 10 years from now, will every animated film be 3D?
It almost is that way now. Here's my honest answer. 3D came along as a way to try to get people into the theater just recently. And it's not for every movie. A lot of filmmakers don't want to make their films in 3D or care about it. But I do believe more and more every movie will be in 3D. It pretty much is now. Every animated movie is available in 3D, more so than any other medium. You see, you see live action movies drop off the 3D charts all the time. But animation, it's there, it's in the medium, you have the data to create it, and it just gives the audience that extra immersive experience. And for Tim on this movie, it was like the sets are so interesting, and the idea of being on the set of a stop motion movie is so exciting. He wanted to use 3D to be there, so you felt like you were actually there. So yeah, you'll see a lot of 3D.
And The Great Gatsby is 3D, isn't it?
I don't know. The new Great Gatsby?
No, I think it is.
It is.
There
indeed,
is.
yeah.
There's a new Great Gatsby coming out from
Long Day's Journey into the Night, that would be good 3D.
It'd be good.
Wide Day's Journey into the Night.
You a fan of 3D?
I do like 3D. I'm fascinated by Gatsby, actually, because I don't know what that's going. I mean, I get Titanic 3D,
Yeah.
but Night Mother 3D. I don't know if it's for drama, but in the same respect, someone was saying, in 1932, I don't know why every film has to have sound.
Yeah.
Sometimes it spoils the effect if you can just watch it. I can create my own voices.
Yeah.
It's a brave new world out there. It's
It is a brave new world. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for coming, and thanks very much to you guys for coming. Frankenweenie's out on the 17th. Thank you, Martin Short, Don Hahn. Thank you.
Thank you.